was saying that too, so I'm not the only one. Rock has its own kind of unique energy.
Well, it's not for me. Because, you know, or work.
Yeah, or whatever.
Or
Just like,
I mean, it's easy for you to say when you're good.
Sorry, I just don't want you to get in trouble.
I know.
focus up. This is very serious.
Pina colada?
I don't like the taste of alcohol. My taxes, I do.
You.
I'm trying to say that you said drop your guys, Sarah.
Field trip to the bar.
All right.
Do what?
Fuck that.
School musical?
Sarah will sing in bar with
My
you
car's
guys.
headed to Greedos.
We could drop her off on the way.
I can take you.
Have it. Great, just bought a guy's heroin.
Who would know?
Not funny, didn't know what it's like to need.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's just a job.
Feeling love, and I want to feel love if I want to.
For decades, One Piece seemed almost impossible to translate into live action. Its oceans are filled with rubber-bodied pirates, talking creatures, impossible islands, oversized weapons, and emotions so enormous that characters can shift from absurd comedy to devastating tragedy in the same scene. But the Netflix series understood that the strangest thing about this world was never its real challenge. The challenge was convincing us that one relentlessly optimistic young pirate could bring damaged people together and make them believe in dreams they had already abandoned. Across its first 2 seasons, One Piece becomes much more than a race toward a legendary treasure. It's the story of 5 outsiders who build a family on the sea, enter a world far larger than they imagined, and slowly discover that freedom always has a price. Every island gives them another enemy, but it also tests whether their promises mean anything when keeping those promises becomes dangerous. And it begins with a public execution. Years before Monkey D. Luffy raises his first pirate flag, the Marines capture Gol D. Roger, the man known throughout the world as the King of the Pirates. They bring him to Logtown, place him before an enormous crowd, and prepare to erase the symbol of an age they can no longer control. Roger doesn't beg for his life. Instead, he uses his final moments to ignite a global obsession. He reveals that his treasure is still somewhere in the world, waiting for whoever can find it. That treasure is the One Piece. Roger's death is supposed to demonstrate the power of the world government. Instead, it launches the Great Pirate Era. Thousands take to the sea, convinced that somewhere beyond the horizon lies wealth, glory, freedom, or the answer to whatever emptiness is driving them forward. Most of those pirates want possession. Luffy wants possibility. When we first meet him as a young man, he doesn't look like someone who could survive the most dangerous ocean in the world. He has no ship, no crew, no map, and almost no practical plan. What he does have is a straw hat, a body that stretches like rubber, and absolute certainty that he will become king of the pirates. That confidence could easily make him unbearable. Instead, it becomes the quality that changes everyone around him. Luffy doesn't measure people by their reputation, their usefulness, or the mistakes in their past. He sees what they want to become, then treats that dream as if it's already real. To understand why, we have to return to his childhood. Luffy grows up admiring a pirate named Red-Haired Shanks. Shanks and his crew spend time in Luffy's village, laughing, drinking, telling stories, and showing him a version of piracy that has nothing to do with cruelty. They don't dominate the weak or terrorize civilians. They live freely, protect one another, and refuse to let pride decide when violence is necessary. Young Luffy mistakes their restraint for cowardice. He wants Shanks to fight every insult and answer every threat. He hasn't yet learned that strength isn't proven by reacting to everything. While trying to prove that he belongs with the pirates, Luffy accidentally eats a mysterious devil fruit. These rare fruits grant supernatural abilities, but the person who consumes one loses the ability to swim. For a future pirate, that weakness should end the dream immediately. Luffy barely considers it. The fruit transforms his body into rubber. His arms stretch, attacks bounce away from him, and physical rules become more like suggestions. But his power arrives before his maturity. When local bandits place him in danger, Shanks and his crew intervene. During the rescue, Luffy is nearly consumed by a sea beast. Shanks saves him, but loses an arm in the process. Only then does Luffy understand what real courage looks like. Shanks doesn't lecture him or demand repayment. Before leaving the village, he gives Luffy his straw hat and asks him to return it after becoming a great pirate. The hat becomes more than an accessory. It's a promise carried on Luffy's head. It connects his childhood mistake to the man he intends to become. Whenever the series places that hat in danger, it isn't threatening an object. It's threatening the idea that someone once believed in Luffy before he had done anything to deserve that belief. Years later, Luffy begins his voyage in the least impressive way possible, trapped inside a barrel drifting at sea. He emerges aboard a pirate vessel controlled by Alvida, a brutal captain who maintains power through fear. Her crew obeys because disobedience means punishment, and nobody understands that better than Kobe. Kobe has been trapped in Alvida's service for years. He dreams of joining the Marines, but the dream has become something he discusses rather than pursues. He's timid, apologetic, and so accustomed to being controlled that freedom terrifies him almost as much as captivity. Luffy hears Kobe say that he wants to become a Marine and reacts as though the decision has already been made. He doesn't mock the contradiction of a future pirate helping a future Marine. To Luffy, both dreams are valid because both belong to people brave enough to claim them. That philosophy is one of the first important clues to the series' larger conflict. One Piece doesn't divide the world neatly between heroic pirates and evil Marines. Some pirates liberate people, others enslave them. Some Marines sincerely protect the innocent, others use justice as permission to dominate. The uniform or flag matters less than the choice made by the person carrying it. Luffy defeats Alvida, giving Kobe his first real opportunity to escape, but freedom still requires Kobe to make a decision. Luffy can open the door. He can't force his new friend to walk through it. Together they travel to Shell's Town, where Kobe hopes to enlist at a Marine base commanded by Captain Axehand Morgan. Morgan has turned the base into a monument to himself. His enormous statue towers over the town, and his authority depends on everyone accepting that his strength gives him the right to rule. His son, Helmeppo, has learned the same lesson. Helmeppo terrorizes civilians because he knows his father's name protects him from consequences. The person who finally challenges that protection is Roronoa Zoro. Zoro is already feared as a pirate hunter, though he isn't motivated by justice or loyalty to the Marines. He hunts criminals for money while pursuing a larger ambition, becoming the greatest swordsman in the world. His fighting style immediately separates him from everyone else. Zoro uses 3 swords, holding one in each hand and a third between his teeth. The image could have looked ridiculous. Instead, the live-action series presents it as an extension of his extreme discipline. Zoro has built his entire identity around a promise, and every blade represents the years he has spent refusing to let that promise die. As a child, Zoro trained beside Quina, the most gifted student at her father's dojo. No matter how hard he worked, he couldn't defeat her. Their rivalry eventually became a bond, and the two promised that one of them would become the world's greatest swordsman. Quina died before either could fulfill that dream. Zoro inherited her sword and made their shared promise the center of his life. He doesn't seek the title for fame alone. Becoming the greatest means carrying both of their futures forward. Failure would feel like losing Quina a second time. By the time Luffy meets him, Zoro has been tied to a post in the Marine Yard after protecting a young girl from Helmeppo's cruelty. Helmeppo has promised to release him after a period of punishment, but has no intention of keeping his word. Luffy immediately decides that Zoro will join his crew. Zoro immediately refuses. This is the pattern that will define many of Luffy's relationships. He recognizes a future crew member before that person recognizes a place for themselves. He isn't impressed merely because Zoro can fight. He's drawn to the seriousness of Zoro's dream. While Luffy attempts to free him, another thief has entered the Marine base. Nami is clever, guarded, and far more experienced at surviving this world than either Luffy or Kobe. She steals from pirates and insists that she hates them, yet she also needs a navigational chart leading toward the Grand Line. Nami operates through deception because she has learned not to depend on anyone. Where Luffy announces every intention, Nami hides hers. Where he trusts almost instantly, she calculates escape routes. Their personalities seem completely incompatible, but Luffy notices her skill as a navigator and once again decides that the crew has gained a member before she has agreed to anything. The map places Luffy, Zoro, and Nami on a collision course with Morgan. Luffy wants Zoro's swords. Nami wants the chart. Zoro wants his freedom. Kobe wants to enter the very organization whose local commander is proving that the Marines can be as corrupt as any pirate crew. Morgan attempts to crush them through force, but the battle exposes the weakness behind his authority. His soldiers don't respect him, they fear him. Once Luffy and Zoro demonstrate that Morgan can be challenged, the entire structure begins to collapse. Zoro retrieves his swords and fights beside Luffy, not because he has suddenly embraced the idea of friendship, but because their goals have temporarily aligned. Yet, Luffy already behaves like a captain protecting his crew. That difference matters. Morgan commands through fear. Luffy leads through belief. After Morgan falls, Kobe is finally close to achieving his dream of joining the Marines. There's one problem. His association with Luffy could make the Marines suspect that he's a pirate collaborator. Luffy solves this in the harshest way Kobe doesn't yet understand. He publicly attacks him, creating the appearance that they were never friends. Kobe fights back, and the Marines accept his request to enlist. It's a small sacrifice, but it reveals something important beneath Luffy's carefree personality. He understands people better than he appears to. He knows Kobe must step away from him to move forward, so Luffy makes that separation possible, even if it means allowing Kobe to think their friendship has ended badly. As Luffy, Zoro, and Nami leave Shell's Town, they aren't yet a true crew. Zoro has only agreed to travel with Luffy, and Nami still rejects the label of pirate. None of them fully trust one another, but the foundation is there. A captain with no ship has found a swordsman carrying a dead friend's dream and a navigator concealing a purpose she refuses to explain. Somewhere ahead of them is the Grand Line. Before they can reach it, however, they will have to survive a clown who can split his body apart, a liar who desperately wants to become brave, and the first signs that Nami's hatred of pirates is hiding a much more painful truth. The Straw Hats' first real voyage begins without a proper ship or a shared understanding of what the crew even is. Luffy calls himself the captain. Zoro treats the arrangement as temporary. Nami keeps insisting that she hasn't joined at all. Then they arrive in Orange Town and meet a pirate who turns performance into terror. Buggy the Clown has transformed the town into his personal circus. The streets are deserted, buildings have been destroyed, and the surviving residents are forced to become an audience for a show designed entirely around Buggy's ego. His bright costume, painted face, and theatrical voice make him look ridiculous until it becomes clear that the comedy is part of the threat. Buggy doesn't merely want people to fear him. He wants them to watch him being feared. His devil fruit ability allows him to divide his body into separate pieces and control them independently. Blades can slice through him without causing normal damage. His hands fly across rooms. His head separates from his body. The power perfectly matches his personality because Buggy has built his life around fragmentation. Everything is broken into acts, jokes, grudges, and punishments, with Buggy always standing at the center, demanding applause. Nami initially believes she can manipulate him. She pretends that she has captured Luffy and offers the young pirate to Buggy, hoping to recover the Grand Line map and escape before either side understands what she's doing. This is how Nami survives. She enters every relationship expecting betrayal, so she makes sure that she can betray the other person first. But Buggy is more observant than he appears. He sees through her performance and forces her to prove her loyalty by firing a cannon at Luffy. Inside the cannon is one of Buggy's destructive buggy balls, powerful enough to erase buildings. Nami can steal from pirates and lie to them, but killing someone who trusts her is different. Luffy, even while trapped, refuses to condemn her. He knows she doesn't truly want to pull the fuse. His confidence in her creates a problem Nami has spent years avoiding. Someone has trusted the person beneath the deception. She turns the weapon against Buggy's crew instead. The confrontation also reveals that Buggy has a history with Shanks. The two once sailed together when they were younger, and Buggy still carries bitter resentment over the events that led him to consume his devil fruit and lose a treasure map. To Buggy, Shanks is the man who ruined his future. To Luffy, Shanks is the man who gave his future meaning. That contrast makes their conflict personal. Buggy mocks the straw hat, damages it, and treats Luffy's promise to Shanks as childish sentiment. Luffy's mood changes immediately. He can laugh at attacks against himself, but disrespecting the hat is different. It represents sacrifice, trust, and the standard he's trying to reach. Zoro, meanwhile, remains the most practical member of the group. He has no interest in Buggy's showmanship and tries to solve the problem with blades. Yet Buggy's divided body makes conventional sword attacks nearly useless. Defeating him requires the group to work together rather than relying on one person's strength. Nami begins trapping Buggy's scattered body parts inside containers while Zoro prevents the remaining pieces from reassembling. By the time Buggy understands the plan, most of his body has been boxed away. Luffy sends what remains of him flying out of town. The victory is played as comedy, but it establishes how the crew will function. Luffy provides momentum, Zoro provides force. Nami provides strategy. None of them could have defeated Buggy as efficiently alone. More importantly, Nami stays. She still refuses to call herself a pirate, yet her actions are beginning to contradict her words. She repairs Luffy's damaged hat, carefully stitching the torn material together. It's a quiet gesture, but for Nami it's almost an admission. She may not understand Luffy's loyalty, but she no longer wants to destroy it. The group now possesses the Grand Line map, but they still need a ship capable of carrying them there. Their search brings them to Syrup Village, where they meet a young man whose greatest weapon is a story. Usopp races through the village shouting that pirates are coming. Nobody believes him. He has repeated the warning too many times, turning danger into a daily performance that the villagers have learned to ignore. Like Buggy, Usopp creates an audience. But his lies come from a very different place. Usopp's father, Yasopp, left to sail with Shanks and the red-haired pirates. As a child, Usopp began announcing the arrival of pirates because he desperately wanted one of those announcements to become true. He wanted his father to return. He wanted adventure to appear on the horizon and prove that the waiting had meant something. After his mother died, the stories continued. They became armor against loneliness. In Usopp's imagination, he isn't an abandoned village boy whose warnings have become a joke. He's Captain Usopp, a fearless warrior with thousands of followers and impossible victories behind him. The tragedy is that his lies describe the person he genuinely wants to become. Luffy likes him almost immediately. Usopp works around the local shipyard and introduces the group to Kaya, the wealthy young owner who inherited the business after losing her parents. Kaya has spent years isolated inside her mansion, suffering from a mysterious illness and depending on her household staff. Usopp visits her window and tells stories about adventures he claims to have experienced. Kaya knows that much of what he says is invented, but the truth of the events isn't the point. His stories give her access to a world beyond medication, grief, and the walls of her home. The affection between them is real precisely because both understand the fiction. Luffy hopes Kaya will provide a ship. She is drawn to his directness and agrees that the group should receive one, but her chief butler, Klahadore, strongly opposes the idea. Klahadore presents himself as controlled, intelligent, and completely devoted to Kaya's welfare. He views Usopp as irresponsible, Luffy as dangerous, and the request for a ship as an attempt to exploit a vulnerable young woman. At first, his suspicion appears reasonable. Then Zoro recognizes one of the mansion's other servants as a pirate he has encountered before, and the carefully maintained image begins to crack. Klahadore is actually Captain Kuro, the former leader of the Black Cat Pirates. Years earlier, Kuro became tired of being hunted and created an elaborate plan to disappear from pirate life. He staged his death, adopted a new identity, entered Kaya's household, and spent 3 years earning her trust. His patience is what makes him terrifying. Buggy destroys everything around him in a burst of emotion. Kuro is willing to wait years for the exact moment when murder becomes profitable. He has been slowly poisoning Kaya, making her illness appear natural. Once she signs control of her fortune over to him, Kuro intends to kill her and inherit everything without attracting suspicion. Usopp discovers the truth, but his history of lying becomes Kuro's greatest protection. When Usopp runs into the village shouting that pirates are really coming, the residents laugh. The warning he once used to entertain himself has now become useless when he needs it most. This is Usopp's first real test. Being brave would be easy if everyone believed him. Instead, he has to act while the village thinks he's telling another story. He can run, preserve his reputation as a harmless liar, and let Kuro's plan unfold. Or he can face actual pirates and risk his life for someone who may never know what he tried to do. Luffy believes him. That support gives Usopp what he has been missing. Luffy doesn't suddenly make him fearless. He makes fear something Usopp can move through. Inside Kaya's mansion, Kuro abandons the gentle posture of a servant. His clawed weapons extend from his gloves, and his speed turns the corridors into a hunting ground. The house that was meant to protect Kaya becomes a trap, with locked doors, hidden attackers, and no clear path to safety. Zoro is thrown into a well but refuses to stay down. Nami protects Kaya while searching for proof of Kuro's plan. Usopp uses his knowledge of the mansion and his skill with a slingshot. Luffy confronts Kuro directly. Kuro dismisses Luffy's idea of piracy as childish. To him, a crew is a burden, loyalty is foolish, and the life of a wanted man offers nothing except exhaustion. He wants wealth without danger and freedom without responsibility. Luffy rejects that entire philosophy. For Luffy, the crew isn't the cost of the dream. The crew is what gives the dream value. Their battle becomes another argument over leadership. Kuro treats his followers as disposable tools. He even slaughters members of his own crew when they become inconvenient. Luffy risks himself for people he has only recently met. Kuro spent years pretending to care about Kaya. Luffy cares so instinctively that deception barely occurs to him. Luffy finally defeats Kuro, ending the Black Cat captain's attempt to steal Kaya's life and fortune. The village may never fully understand how close it came to disaster, but Usopp does. For once, one of his pirate stories became real, and when the moment arrived, he didn't hide behind the lie. Kaya rewards the group with a ship designed in honor of her late servant Mary. Its figurehead resembles a sheep, its deck offers enough space for the growing crew, and its name is the Going Merry. For Luffy, it's the first physical sign that his dream is becoming something larger than enthusiasm. He now has a real ship, a Grand Line map, and 3 companions whose actions increasingly make them a crew, whether they admit it or not. Usopp chooses to leave Syrup Village and join them. Before departing, he shares a tender goodbye with Kaya. She has given him a ship, but he has given her something just as important: the courage to imagine a life beyond her illness. Usopp boards the Going Merry, claiming the authority of a great captain. Luffy casually informs him that the captain's position is already occupied. The joke hides a meaningful transition. Usopp spent years inventing adventures because he was afraid he would never experience one. Now he is finally sailing away to create stories he won't have to lie about. But as the Going Merry leaves Syrup Village, another pursuit is closing in. Vice Admiral Garp has taken a particular interest in Luffy's journey. Kobe and Helmeppo are beginning their marine training under him, learning that discipline is far more demanding than simply wearing a uniform. And Garp is prepared to use one of the world's most dangerous swordsmen to test just how far the new pirate crew can travel. The Straw Hats have survived a tyrant, an evil clown, and a patient killer. Their next destination will introduce them to a floating restaurant, a chef who fights with his feet, and Dracule Mihawk, the man whose title represents everything Zoro has promised to become. The Going Merry's arrival at Baratie should feel like a celebration. Luffy finally has a ship, his crew is growing, and the entrance to the Grand Line is getting closer. Instead, the restaurant becomes the place where every member of the crew is forced to prove how much their dream is actually worth. Barassi is unlike anything they have encountered in the East Blue. It's a massive floating restaurant shaped like a fish, serving wealthy travelers, marines, merchants, and pirates without caring which flag they follow. Inside, polished dining rooms sit above crowded kitchens where insults fly almost as quickly as knives. The restaurant is run by Zeff, a former pirate known as Red Leg Zeff. Age and the loss of one leg have ended his life at sea, but they haven't softened him. He operates the kitchen through discipline, high standards, and constant arguments with his most gifted cook. That cook is Sanji. Sanji looks almost too refined for the Straw Hats. He dresses neatly, speaks with confidence, and immediately becomes distracted by Nami. But behind the charm is a fighter whose greatest weapon is his legs. He refuses to use his hands in combat because a chef's hands are meant to prepare food. This isn't a gimmick. It tells us exactly how Sanji understands himself. Fighting is something he can do. Cooking is something he is. Luffy recognizes his value almost immediately and invites him to join the crew. As usual, Luffy treats the decision as obvious. They need a cook. Sanji is an excellent cook, and therefore Sanji belongs on the ship. Sanji refuses. He claims that he owes Zeff too much to leave Baratie. Their relationship appears hostile from the outside. Zeff criticizes his food, mocks his ambitions, and seems determined to make every conversation into an argument. Sanji responds with equal anger, yet neither man truly wants what he says he wants. Sanji insists that he must remain. Zeff keeps trying to push him away. The reason becomes clear when a starving pirate named Jin arrives at the restaurant. Jin has no money and can offer nothing in return. Other workers want him removed, but Sanji quietly gives him food. For Sanji, feeding someone who is hungry is not an act of generosity. It's a rule that cannot be broken. He knows what starvation does to a person. Years earlier, Sanji worked as a young apprentice aboard a passenger ship. Even then, he dreamed of finding the All Blue, a legendary sea where fish and ingredients from all four oceans are said to exist together. The other cooks dismissed the story as fantasy. Then Zeff and his pirates attacked. During the raid, a violent storm destroyed both ships. Zeff saved Sanji from drowning, and the two became stranded on an isolated rock with no vegetation, no fresh water, and almost no chance of rescue. Zeff divided what appeared to be their remaining supplies. Sanji received one bag and was told to stay on the opposite side of the rock. He carefully rationed his food, waiting for a ship that never seemed to come. As the days passed, hunger reduced the world to a single thought. Dreams, pride, and anger stopped mattering. Food became the difference between remaining human and becoming something desperate. When Sanji's supplies were exhausted, he attacked Zeff, believing the older pirate had kept the larger share for himself. But Zeff's bag contained treasure, not food. He had given Sanji everything. Zeff survived by cutting off and eating his own leg. He made that sacrifice because Sanji shared his belief in the All Blue and still had time to find it. Zeff didn't save him merely to keep him alive. He saved the possibility of Sanji's future. That experience explains why Sanji will feed anyone, including an enemy. He knows that hunger strips away identity. A starving pirate and a starving marine become the same person. Refusing food to either would mean forgetting the sacrifice that allowed him to survive. It also explains why he feels unable to leave Zeff. Sanji thinks gratitude means staying beside the man who saved him. Zeff understands that staying would waste the very future his leg purchased. Luffy sees the truth before Sanji is ready to accept it. The dream of the All Blue isn't childish. It's Sanji's equivalent of the One Piece, Queena's Promise, or the map Nami secretly wants to draw. Luffy isn't simply recruiting a useful cook. He's offering Sanji a route toward the life Zeff preserved for him. But before Sanji can make that choice, another dream arrives at Baratie in human form. Dracule Mihawk crosses the sea alone in a vessel resembling a coffin. He is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, pirates powerful enough to operate with the approval of the world government. More importantly to Zoro, Mihawk is recognized as the greatest swordsman alive. Vice Admiral Garp has sent Mihawk to stop Luffy, but the warlord becomes more interested in the young man who approaches him with 3 swords and an impossible challenge. The moment Zoro learns Mihawk's identity, everything else disappears. He knows the difference between them must be enormous. He knows he may die. But if he allows the world's greatest swordsman to walk away without testing himself, then his promise to Quina becomes empty. For Zoro, refusing the duel would be worse than losing it. Mihawk initially treats the challenge like an inconvenience. Rather than drawing the enormous black blade carried across his back, he uses a tiny knife. The insult is deliberate. Mihawk wants Zoro to understand that the gap between them is so wide that his full weapon would be unnecessary. Zoro attacks with the technique that has defeated every previous opponent. Mihawk stops him almost effortlessly. The duel dismantles Zoro's identity one strike at a time. His speed isn't enough. His strength isn't enough. Years of training aren't enough. Mihawk barely moves, yet controls every exchange. But Zoro refuses to retreat. That refusal finally earns Mihawk's attention. Skill can be developed, but conviction is harder to find. Mihawk draws his black sword, Yoru, acknowledging that Zoro deserves to face the weapon he came to challenge. The result never feels uncertain. Mihawk defeats him and shatters 2 of his swords. Zoro remains standing long enough to face the final strike directly. He won't turn his back because a wound across the back would represent shame for a swordsman. Mihawk cuts him across the chest. Zoro falls into the sea, apparently defeated not only physically, but spiritually. The goal that shaped his entire life has just been shown to be unimaginably distant, yet Mihawk doesn't finish him. He sees potential in Zoro's determination and commands him to grow stronger. The defeat becomes an invitation. Mihawk will remain at the summit, waiting to see whether Zoro can one day reach him. When Zoro regains consciousness, Luffy remains beside him. Luffy never ordered the duel and couldn't protect Zoro from its consequences. This is a difficult lesson for a captain who believes he can solve almost anything by refusing to give up. His crew members have dreams of their own, and sometimes supporting those dreams means allowing them to take risks he cannot control. Zoro raises his sword and makes a new promise. He will never lose again until he defeats Mihawk. For the first time, he openly addresses Luffy as the future king of the pirates. That moment changes their relationship. Zoro is no longer traveling with Luffy because circumstances place them on the same ship. He has chosen him as captain. While Zoro is being treated inside Baratie, Garp arrives and speaks with Zeff. The 2 older men stand on opposite sides of the law, but both understand the sea and the kind of obsession that drives young people toward it. Garp wants Luffy to abandon piracy before it destroys him. Zeff knows that crushing a true dream doesn't make someone safe. It only leaves them alive without direction. Garp's pursuit is personal because Luffy is his grandson. This revelation reframes the Marine storyline. Garp isn't hunting an anonymous criminal. He's trying to force his family onto a path he believes will protect them. He trained Luffy harshly as a child and expected him to become a Marine, but Luffy inherited a hunger for freedom that discipline could never erase. Garp calls that recklessness. Luffy calls it living. Before their conflict can reach a conclusion, Arlong arrives. The fishman captain immediately feels different from the enemies Luffy has faced. Buggy wanted attention. Kuro wanted comfort. Arlong wants domination built on the belief that fishmen are naturally superior to humans. He doesn't enter Baratie looking for food or money. He comes for Nami and the map. The truth Nami has hidden finally surfaces. She has been working with Arlong, and her thefts were never random. Her connection to him existed before she met Luffy. Nami hands over the Grand Line map and leaves with the Arlong pirates. To Zoro and Usopp, the betrayal appears undeniable. Nami has taken what they fought to obtain and delivered it to an enemy. Every warning she gave them about trusting pirates now seems like a confession disguised as advice. Luffy refuses to accept the obvious explanation. He has watched Nami protect Kaya, save Orange Town, repair his hat, and remain at Baratie when leaving would have been safer. Her actions don't match the idea that she was always Arlong's loyal servant. Luffy can't explain why she left. He simply knows that the story isn't finished. Sanji helps save Luffy when Arlong throws him into the sea, proving that he has already begun acting like a member of the crew. With Zoro injured, Nami gone, and Garp still pursuing them, continuing forward seems reckless. Luffy decides to follow Nami. Sanji finally accepts the invitation to sail with them. His farewell to Zeff is emotional because years of insults collapse under the truth neither man could comfortably express. Sanji owes Zeff his life, but Zeff never wanted that debt repaid through imprisonment. Leaving is the repayment. Sanji bows, thanks the man who became his mentor and father, and carries the dream of the all-blue aboard the Going Merry. The crew sails toward the Konami Islands with one new member and one missing navigator. They believe they're going to rescue Nami from Arlong. What they don't yet understand is that Nami has spent most of her life trying to rescue everyone else. Cocoa Village looks peaceful from the sea. Orange groves stretch across the land. Villagers move through familiar streets, and nothing immediately reveals that the entire community has spent years living under occupation. That appearance is part of Arlong's control. He doesn't need to destroy the village because fear already keeps it obedient. Every adult must pay for the right to remain alive. Anyone who cannot meet the price becomes an example. The arrangement turns survival into a transaction and allows Arlong to describe brutality as order. Nami grew up here with Nojiko and their adoptive mother, Belmare. Belmare was once a marine. During a battle in the Oikot Kingdom, she found the two orphaned girls and brought them home. The family had very little money, but their life was filled with the kind of affection Nami later trained herself to distrust. Belmare could be stubborn, impatient, and financially irresponsible, yet she never allowed the girls to believe that poverty made their family less real. Young Nami was already fascinated by maps. She wanted to understand the world beyond the village and one day draw a map containing all of it. Belmare encouraged the dream even when they could barely afford the paper needed to begin it. Then the Arlong pirates arrived. Arlong demanded a tribute from every resident. Adults and children were assigned different prices, reducing every human life to an amount of money. Belmare had enough to pay for only herself or for the two girls. She could have denied that Nami and Nojiko were hers. She refused. Belmare used the money to save her daughters and openly declared them as her family, knowing exactly what Arlong would do. He murdered her in front of them. The moment teaches Nami several lessons that shape almost everything she becomes. Love makes people vulnerable. Money decides who survives. Pirates take whatever they want, and relying on someone else means giving that person the power to disappear. Arlong soon discovers Nami's talent for cartography. He forces her to draw maps for his crew, turning the dream Belmare encouraged into an instrument of conquest. Nami makes a bargain. If she can collect 100 million berry, Arlong will allow her to purchase Cocoa Village's freedom. The deal is obviously cruel, but it gives her pain a direction. Instead of grieving, she works. Instead of asking the village to save her, she decides that she will save everyone alone. For 8 years, Nami steals from pirates, suppresses her hatred, and returns to Arlong Park to produce the maps that help her enemy expand his power. The villagers know the truth behind her apparent betrayal, though Nami believes they despise her. They allow her to think this because they know she would otherwise refuse to leave if her plan failed. Her loneliness is therefore built on mutual sacrifice. Nami pretends not to care about the village, so its people won't feel responsible for her. The villagers pretend to reject Nami so she'll remain willing to escape. Everyone is trying to protect everyone else. Nobody is free. When Luffy and the crew arrive, Nojiko explains Nami's history. Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji finally understand that she didn't leave because her friendship with them was false. She left because friendship had become another thing Arlong could use against her. Luffy refuses to sit through the full explanation. At first, his reaction seems careless. He has traveled all this way to understand Nami, yet walks away from the story of her past. But Luffy doesn't need a tragic history to decide whether she deserves help. Nami is his navigator. She's hurting. That is enough. Meanwhile, Nami finally reaches the amount Arlong demanded. She brings him the full 100 million berry and expects him to honor the bargain. Arlong technically avoids taking the money himself. Instead, he secretly directs the corrupt Marine Captain Nezumi to seize it as stolen property. The distinction means nothing. Arlong has never intended to free Nami because her maps are too valuable. The bargain was another cage, one designed to keep her obedient through hope rather than force. Nezumi digs up the money Nami spent years collecting. Every theft, every humiliation, and every day spent working for her mother's killer vanishes in moments. Nami attacks the Marines, but she cannot stop them. When she confronts Arlong, he hides behind the wording of their deal and invites her to begin collecting the money again. That is when the village decides to fight. The residents know they cannot defeat the fishmen. They know resistance will probably end in death. But watching Nami sacrifice another 8 years would be a slower form of destruction. They would rather die beside her than continue surviving through her suffering. Nami tries to stop them and realizes she has lost control of the plan that structured her entire life. She has no money, no agreement, and no strategy left. In despair, she repeatedly drives a blade into the tattoo, marking her as a member of Arlong's crew. Luffy stops her. For most of the season, Nami has answered every offer of friendship with distance. She has escaped problems through cleverness, theft, and preparation. Now there is nothing left to calculate. She finally asks Luffy for help. He places the straw hat on her head. The gesture carries the full weight of everything the hat represents. Luffy entrusted it to almost no one because Shanks entrusted it to him. By placing it on Nami, he isn't merely promising to defeat Arlong. He is telling her that she no longer has to carry the future alone. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp walk toward Arlong Park together. This is the first time the full crew enters a battle with complete unity. At Baratie, Sanji had not yet joined. In Syrup Village, Nami was still hiding her mission. Against Buggy, Zoro and Nami had only begun trusting Luffy. Now they know exactly why they're fighting. Luffy destroys the gates and calls for Arlong. The battle divides across the compound. Sanji faces Kurubi, whose underwater strength places the cook at an immediate disadvantage. Zoro confronts the sword-wielding Hachon while still carrying the wounds Mihawk gave him. Usopp is pursued by Chu and initially survives by running. Each fight exposes a different weakness. Sanji is strongest on his feet, but nearly helpless when trapped beneath the water. Zoro's spirit is ready for battle, while his body is still dangerously damaged. Usopp wants to become a brave warrior, but experiences fear more honestly than anyone else. Usopp's struggle is especially important because he has opportunities to hide. He could pretend to have been defeated and allow the others to believe that he fought heroically. That would preserve the legend of Captain Usopp without requiring actual courage. Instead, he turns back. He uses deception, ammunition, and the environment to defeat Chu. Usopp doesn't become brave by losing his fear. He becomes brave by deciding that fear will not write the ending for him. Zoro defeats Hachon through skill and sheer refusal to collapse. Sanji overcomes Kurubi after escaping the water, proving that his elegance doesn't make him fragile. But the center of the conflict remains Luffy and Arlong. Arlong considers humans inferior. His strength, teeth, and ability to fight in the sea reinforce his belief that fishmen should rule. Behind that arrogance is a wider history of hostility between humans and fishmen, but Arlong has converted the suffering of his people into permission to inflict suffering on others. He claims to value Nami's talent, yet treats her as property. During their battle, Luffy discovers the room where Nami was forced to draw maps for years. The room contains the physical record of her captivity, desks, ink, charts, and the tools Arlong used to turn her gift against the world. Luffy begins destroying it. Arlong thinks Luffy is attacking something Nami values. Luffy understands that he is demolishing the prison attached to her dream. Nami still wants to map the world, but she deserves to do it freely, on her own ship and for her own purpose. Their fight brings Arlong Park down around them. Luffy drives Arlong through the collapsing structure and emerges from the ruins alive. The destruction announces more than the defeat of one pirate captain. The system that held Cocoa Village together through fear has been physically erased. Nami is free. She replaces Arlong's mark with a tattoo honoring Belmare and Nojiko, transforming the place on her body associated with enslavement into a symbol of family. She officially accepts her position as the Straw Hats' navigator, no longer pretending that she is merely traveling with them until a better opportunity appears. Their celebration is interrupted by Garp. The Vice Admiral corners the crew and demands that Luffy abandon piracy. Garp believes he gave his grandson every chance to choose the respectable path of a Marine. Luffy refuses because the dream was never an impulsive rebellion against authority. It is the clearest truth he knows about himself. Garp attacks, and the difference between them is overwhelming. Luffy survived Arlong, but he cannot defeat his grandfather. Garp finally has him helpless and must decide whether protecting Luffy means stopping him or allowing him to face the consequences of his choice. He lets him go. The pursuit has been a test. Garp still disapproves, but he can no longer deny that Luffy possesses the conviction required to live as a pirate. Kobe later visits as a friend and gives Luffy his first wanted poster. The world government has placed a 30 million berry bounty on him, the highest in the East Blue. Most people would see the poster as a warning. Luffy sees proof that the world has finally noticed him. The crew gathers around a barrel and declares their dreams. Zoro will become the greatest swordsman. Nami will draw a map of the world. Usopp will become a brave warrior of the sea. Sanji will find the All Blue. Luffy will become king of the pirates. 5 separate promises are now traveling on one ship. But before the Going Merry can enter the Grand Line, the crew must pass through Logtown, the city where Gol D, Roger died and the Great Pirate Era began. Waiting there are Buggy, Alvida, a relentless marine named Smoker, and a swordswoman who carries a face Zoro thought he would never see again. Logtown is known as the town of the beginning and the end. Gol D, Roger was born there, and years later, the world government executed him on its central platform. One life ended in that square, but the Great Pirate Era began before Roger's body could even be removed. For Luffy, visiting Logtown is almost a pilgrimage. He has declared that he will inherit Roger's title without knowing the man, understanding the treasure, or comprehending the forces protecting it. Standing where Roger died allows him to confront the reality hidden inside his dream. Becoming king of the pirates doesn't simply mean reaching the end of an adventure. It means becoming the greatest target in the world. The Straw Hats dock to gather supplies before attempting the dangerous passage into the Grand Line. Each crew member enters the city with a different priority. Sanji searches for ingredients worthy of his new kitchen. Nami prepares for weather conditions unlike anything in the East Blue. Usopp looks for equipment that might help him turn improvised courage into reliable skill. Zoro needs swords. Mihawk destroyed 2 of his 3 blades, leaving him with only the sword once carried by Quina. Replacing the others isn't as simple as buying weapons. Zoro treats a sword as an extension of the person holding it, and after his defeat at Baratie, any blade he chooses will become part of his attempt to rebuild himself. Inside a local sword shop, he encounters Tashigi, a marine officer with a deep knowledge of famous blades. Her face stops him cold. Tashigi resembles Quina closely enough to reopen a wound Zoro has spent years disguising as determination. He knows she isn't the childhood rival he lost, but memory doesn't respond to logic. Her voice, movements, and passion for swords make it feel as though his past has appeared in a marine uniform. Tashigi believes valuable swords should be protected from criminals and careless owners. Zoro, despite being a wanted pirate, understands that reverence. Their loyalties oppose each other, but their respect for the craft briefly places them on common ground. The shopkeeper eventually gives Zoro two blades, Yubashiri and Sandai Kitetsu. Sandai Kitetsu is said to carry a curse, bringing death to those who wield it. Zoro tests the blade by placing his arm against its reputation. He throws it into the air and holds his arm beneath the falling edge, trusting either his luck or his will to overcome the curse. The blade circles past him without cutting. It's reckless, but it also reflects the transformation Mihawk's defeat has started. Zoro has seen the distance between himself and the summit. From now on, moving forward will require accepting dangers that would stop a more cautious person. While Zoro prepares for future battles, Luffy walks toward the execution platform. He climbs to the place where Roger faced death and looks across the same city square. For a moment, the series places the two pirates inside the same image, the man who completed the journey and the boy who has only just begun it. But Luffy isn't alone for long. Buggy has survived his defeat in Orange Town, and humiliation has only sharpened his obsession. He has joined forces with Alvida, who also wants revenge for what Luffy did to her. Both were dismissed by him almost as quickly as they were defeated. To them, that indifference is another insult. They don't merely want to kill Luffy, they want to turn his death into a performance. Buggy captures him and restrains him on Roger's execution platform, placing the young pirate exactly where his hero spent his final moments. Alvida and Buggy announce their triumph while the city gathers below. The remaining Straw Hats fight through their enemies, but they cannot reach their captain in time. Luffy is trapped, facing a blade with no clear escape. Then he smiles. It's the same impossible calm that Roger displayed before his execution. Luffy doesn't suddenly want to die, and he hasn't abandoned his crew. He simply accepts that he pursued his dream without holding anything back. In what appears to be his final moment, he doesn't beg or pretend to regret the path he chose. He apologizes to his friends because he believes his journey is over. Lightning strikes the platform. The structure erupts, Buggy's execution is interrupted, and Luffy emerges alive. Whether the event is chance, fate, or the first sign of something moving around him remains unanswered. But Captain Smoker sees the connection to Roger. Smoker is unlike the corrupt Marines Luffy has faced. He isn't motivated by money, personal glory, or obedience to a superior's ego. He genuinely believes pirates create suffering and that allowing them to operate freely means abandoning innocent people. In another story, Smoker could easily be the hero. His devil fruit power allows him to transform and control smoke, making ordinary physical attacks ineffective. Where Morgan represented corrupt authority, Smoker represents something more difficult, justice pursued with such certainty that it cannot recognize exceptions. Tashigi sees the Straw Hats as criminals because their wanted poster says they are. Smoker sees Luffy's smile and interprets it as the beginning of another Roger, someone whose existence could destabilize the world. The Straw Hats escape the square, but Smoker catches Luffy in the streets. Luffy's rubber body offers no protection against smoke, and his usual confidence cannot erase the difference in their experience. Just as Smoker prepares to stop him, a hooded man with a patterned face intervenes. The stranger is Dragon, leader of the Revolutionary Army, an organization seeking to overturn the world government. He offers no full explanation for why he helps Luffy. He simply prevents Smoker from ending the voyage and allows the Straw Hats to flee Logtown. For Luffy, the rescue is another unexplained piece of luck. For Garp and Smoker, Dragon's appearance signals something much larger. Luffy's voyage is beginning to attract people connected to conflicts he doesn't yet understand. The world government, the Marines, the warlords, and the Revolutionary Army are all part of a struggle far beyond one boy's search for treasure. The Straw Hats reach the Going Merry and sail into a violent storm. Ahead of them stands Reverse Mountain, one of the few entrances into the Grand Line. Its current flows upward, carrying ships along a narrow channel toward the summit. Enter at the wrong angle, and the Going Merry will smash against the mountain or be dragged beneath the water. This is Nami's first great test as the crew's official navigator. In the East Blue, natural skill and familiar weather patterns were enough. Reverse Mountain behaves like the laws of nature have been rearranged. Nami has to calculate the approach while waves throw the Merry off course and the cliffs close in around them. The others can pull ropes and follow instructions, but they cannot replace her. Their survival depends on trusting the person who once believed she had to solve every problem alone. The Going Merry catches the current and rises. For a brief moment, the crew appears to be sailing into the sky. The four blues meet at the mountain, and the upward rivers converge before descending into the Grand Line. The Straw Hats have crossed the boundary that defeated countless pirates before them. Then they see what looks like another mountain directly in their path. It moves. The obstacle is Laboon, an enormous island whale waiting at the base of Reverse Mountain. The Going Merry cannot turn quickly enough, and the whale swallows the ship with Nami, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji still aboard. Luffy is separated from them outside. Inside Laboon, the crew finds an impossible environment of bones, stomach acid, wreckage, and ships that never escaped. While searching for materials to protect and repair the Merry, they encounter two strangers known as Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday. The pair belong to Baroque Works, a secret criminal organization whose agents use numerical and coded names rather than real identities. They attack the Straw Hats and treat Laboon as a resource to be exploited. Outside, Luffy meets Crocus, the lighthouse keeper and former doctor responsible for caring for the whale. Crocus explains that Laboon's violence is not aggression, it is grief. Long ago, the young whale befriended the Rumbar pirates. Their music drew him to them, and Laboon began following their ship. Because the Grand Line was too dangerous for him, the crew left him with Crocus and promised to return after sailing around the world. They never came back. Laboon has waited for years, repeatedly driving his head against the red line as though he can break through the continent and reach the friends who disappeared. Crocus sedates him to prevent further injury, but the medicine is becoming less effective. Luffy initially tries to solve the problem with force. When that fails, he reaches Laboon in the language the whale remembers. Music. He sings the old pirate song once played by the Rumbar crew. Laboon responds, releasing the Going Merry and the trapped Straw Hats. But Luffy understands that comfort alone will not stop the whale from hurting himself. Laboon needs a new promise, one tied to the future rather than the past. Luffy paints the Straw Hat Jolly Roger across Laboon's scarred head and declares the whale part of their friendship. If Laboon continues striking the mountain, he will damage the symbol. Luffy promises that after the crew completes its journey, they will return for another meeting. The logic is childish. The effect is profound. Luffy cannot replace the Rumbar pirates or erase Laboon's years of waiting. What he can do is give that waiting a new direction. The Jolly Roger transforms Laboon's scars from evidence of abandonment into a promise that someone intends to come back. The Straw Hats leave Twin Cape with Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday held aboard the Merry. They have finally entered the Grand Line, but their first prisoners are also their first direct connection to Baroque Works. Ahead lies Whisky Peak, a town famous for welcoming pirates with open arms. After everything the crew has endured, that hospitality sounds almost too good to be true. It is. Whisky Peak welcomes the Straw Hats like heroes. Music fills the streets. Food covers the tables. Drinks arrive faster than the crew can finish them, and the people of the town celebrate the arrival of another pirate ship as though they have been waiting their entire lives to meet Luffy. After Logtown, Reverse Mountain, and Laboon, the attention feels like a reward. Luffy eats without suspicion. Sanji enjoys the hospitality. Usopp begins turning their recent adventures into increasingly heroic stories. Even Nami allows herself to appreciate a place where pirates are apparently admired rather than hunted. Zoro doesn't relax. Something about Whisky Peak feels rehearsed. The smiles are too immediate, the questions are too carefully directed, and the celebration begins before anyone in town could possibly know whether the Straw Hats deserve it. The party is not hospitality. It is preparation. Whisky Peak is controlled by Baroque Works, and its friendly residents are bounty hunters waiting for visiting pirates to lower their guard. The town sits beneath mountains that appear to be covered in cactus needles from a distance. In reality, those shapes are graves, the remains of crews who believed the welcome was genuine. This is the Grand Line's first real lesson. Danger here does not always announce itself with a pirate flag or a weapon. Sometimes it offers dinner, learns your name, and waits for you to fall asleep. When the Baroque Works agents finally reveal themselves, Zoro is ready. He faces an army of assassins alone, turning the streets of Whisky Peak into a test of everything he has rebuilt since losing to Mihawk. At Baratie, he discovered that his determination was greater than his ability. Now, against roughly 100 agents, he begins proving that the defeat did not break him. Zoro moves through the town with the 2 replacement swords he received in Logtown, adapting to their balance while protecting the blade that belonged to Quina. His opponents rely on numbers, hidden weapons, and the belief that one swordsman will eventually become exhausted. Zoro relies on discipline. Mr. 9 attacks with the confidence of someone who mistakes rank for ability. Miss Monday brings overwhelming physical strength. Neither understands that Zoro is no longer measuring himself against ordinary fighters. Every opponent is compared with Mihawk, and after witnessing that level of mastery, intimidation from lesser enemies has lost much of its power. He defeats agent after agent until the town's performance collapses completely. But the battle reveals that Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9 were never simple captives. After escaping the Going Merry, they attempted to reclaim the ship because they needed a route away from Whisky Peak. Their desperation initially appears to confirm that they are loyal Baroque Works agents. Then, 2 more assassins arrive with orders to kill Miss Wednesday. Mr. 5 can transform parts of his body into explosives. Miss Valentine can alter her weight, becoming light enough to float before dropping with crushing force. Their presence exposes a division inside the organization. Miss Wednesday and Igaram, the man operating under the identity of Mr. 8, have been working undercover. The criminal group they joined has been destabilizing the desert kingdom of Alabasta, spreading resentment between the population and its ruler, King Cobra. Miss Wednesday's real name is Nefertari Vivi. She is the Princess of Alabasta. Vivi entered Baroque Works with Igaram, captain of her kingdom's royal guard, hoping to identify the person behind the conspiracy. She discovered an organization built to prevent members from seeing the whole plan. Agents use code names. Partners know only what their assignment requires. Most have never seen the leader they serve. The mystery protects everyone at the top. If one agent is captured, that person cannot reveal a structure they were never allowed to understand. Vivi's investigation has brought her closer to the truth, but Baroque Works has now discovered her identity. She needs to return to Alabasta, warn her father, and stop the country from tearing itself apart. Luffy agrees to help before considering payment, distance, or danger. Nami immediately asks for 1 billion berry. Her demand sounds mercenary, but it reflects how differently she and Luffy understand responsibility. Luffy hears that a friend needs help and commits the crew. Nami hears that they are being asked to transport a hunted princess through the world's most dangerous sea, while an army of assassins follows them. One reacts through instinct. The other calculates the cost. Together, They form a captain and navigator capable of surviving choices that would become disastrous if either acted alone. Mr. Five and Miss Valentine attack before negotiations can matter. Luffy and Nami join the fight, protecting someone who had recently tried to steal their ship. That contradiction is central to the Straw Hats. Membership in their circle is not determined by a perfect past. It is determined by what a person is fighting for when the truth becomes clear. Igaram understands that Vivi will never escape while Baroque Works can track her movements. Badly injured, he creates a diversion, departing separately and drawing attention away from the Going Merry. The plan appears to work. Then his vessel explodes. Vivi watches the fire from the sea and loses the man who followed her into the organization, protected her secret, and treated her safety as more important than his own life. There is no time to return and no enemy she can immediately punish. All she can do is continue toward the kingdom he died trying to save. This loss separates Vivi from the Straw Hats in one crucial way. Luffy and his crew are traveling toward their dreams. Vivi is racing toward a disaster. Every delay could mean more people joining the rebellion, more violence between citizens, and fewer chances to prevent civil war. She does not have the freedom to treat each island as an adventure. Her destination contains everyone she is responsible for. The Grand Line, however, cannot be navigated through urgency alone. Ordinary compasses are useless because the islands contain unusual magnetic fields. Crocus has provided the crew with a log pose, which records an island's magnetic signature before pointing toward the next destination. The device determines their route, forcing them to wait when the sea demands patience. Their next stop is Little Garden. The name suggests something small and harmless. The island is neither. Little Garden has remained prehistoric, filled with dense jungle, extreme heat, poisonous creatures, and dinosaurs that should have disappeared from the world long ago. Its natural environment reminds the crew that the Grand Line is not simply an ocean containing stronger pirates. Each island can function like its own world, with different climates, histories, and rules. Luffy reacts to the dinosaurs with delight. Nami sees numerous ways to die. Usopp is terrified until he meets the two beings who redefine his idea of courage. Dory and Brogy are giants who have lived on Little Garden for more than a century. They were once co-captains, and they continue fighting a duel whose original importance has become almost secondary to the honor of finishing it properly. Whenever the island's volcano erupts, the signal calls them into battle. They fight with weapons large enough to destroy buildings, laugh through injuries that would kill ordinary people, and then separate until the next challenge begins. Neither appears to hate the other. Their conflict has survived because each respects the other too much to accept an unearned victory. To Luffy, they are immediately fascinating. To Usopp, they are the living form of everything he has pretended to be. Usopp has described himself as a mighty warrior since Syrup Village, but the giants do not need to exaggerate their courage. Their lives are already legendary. They speak of Elbaf, the homeland of the giants, and awaken a new dream in him. One day, Usopp wants to see Elbaf himself. This matters because his ambition is beginning to gain shape. Becoming a brave warrior of the sea once meant transforming into some fearless version of himself. Dory and Brogy show him that courage can be connected to culture, loyalty, and a code larger than personal reputation. While Usopp studies the giants, Luffy and Vivi explore the island together. They ride among dinosaurs and eventually hold a memorial for Igaram. The ceremony cannot prove whether he survived the explosion, but it gives Vivi space to acknowledge what she has lost. Luffy does not attempt to explain the grief away. He simply remains beside her. Their relationship begins changing here. Vivi is practical, diplomatic, and constantly aware of how one decision affects thousands of people. Luffy acts from emotion and rarely worries about consequences until they arrive. Yet each possesses something the other needs. Vivi can teach Luffy that leadership sometimes requires patience. Luffy can teach Vivi that responsibility does not mean carrying every burden alone. Baroque Works has followed them to Little Garden. Mr. Five and Miss Valentine return after surviving Whisky Peak, but the greater danger comes from Mr. Three and Miss Golden Week. Mr. Three has consumed the wax fruit, giving him the ability to produce and shape wax that becomes as hard as steel. He does not see murder as a simple task. He sees it as art. Miss Golden Week appears less threatening, but her painted symbols can manipulate emotion. With colors and patterns, she can push victims into unnatural moods, turning focus into confusion, resistance into laughter, and certainty into obedience. Their powers are dangerous because they attack more than the body. Mr. Three restrains movement. Miss Golden Week interferes with intention. The assassins exploit the giant's honor, knowing that direct combat would be far more difficult than manipulating the rules by which Dory and Brogy live. The duel that has lasted a century becomes another tool for Baroque Works. Soon, Zoro, Nami, and Vivi are trapped in rising wax. As the substance hardens around them, Mr. Three begins transforming living people into the centerpieces of his next display. Miss Golden Week places Zoro into a ridiculous, uncontrollable trance, neutralizing one of the crew's strongest fighters without having to defeat him in a fair duel. Luffy is also caught in the psychological trap. His physical power means nothing if an enemy can redirect his emotions before he decides where to strike. The situation falls to the person most likely to believe he cannot handle it. Usopp. He is surrounded by giant warriors, devil fruit assassins, dinosaurs, and crewmates, slowly being turned into wax statues. Every heroic story he told Kaya feels painfully small beside the reality in front of him, but this is exactly what those stories were preparing him for. Usopp does not possess Zoro's strength, Sanji's speed, or Luffy's supernatural resilience. He possesses distance, improvisation, and an imagination trained by years of inventing solutions that did not yet exist. On Little Garden, the crew's survival will depend on whether the greatest liar in the East Blue can finally create a heroic ending that is completely true. Usopp has spent most of his life using imagination to escape reality. On Little Garden, imagination becomes the tool that saves everyone else. Mr. Three has trapped Nami, Zoro, and Vivi inside hardened wax, while Miss Golden Week's painted symbols interfere with the emotions of anyone attempting to help. Luffy possesses the power to destroy the structure, but her color-based hypnosis drains his determination before he can act. Usopp cannot overpower the assassins directly, so he disrupts the system controlling the battlefield. His quick thinking breaks the trance and creates the opening needed to free the others. The plan isn't elegant, and it doesn't transform Usopp into an unstoppable fighter. It succeeds because he understands something Mr. Three does not. A battle is not automatically won by the person with the stronger ability. Sometimes it is won by the person who notices how that ability can be interrupted. Once Nami, Zoro, and Vivi are free, the balance changes immediately. Mr. Five and Miss Valentine are forced to face opponents who now understand their techniques. Explosions and crushing changes in weight remain dangerous, but surprise was always one of Baroque Works' greatest advantages. Without it, the assassins discover that the straw hats are far more difficult to control. Luffy confronts Mr. Three. The wax assassin considers himself an artist and treats his victims as materials. He is patient, methodical, and proud of defeating stronger enemies through traps. To him, the Straw Hats are simply the latest figures waiting to be arranged inside one of his displays. Luffy hates the idea instinctively. Mr. Three turns people into objects. Luffy sees people as unfinished dreams. Their fight becomes another clash between control and freedom. Mr. Three builds walls, restraints, doubles, and weapons designed to limit movement. Luffy attacks through them with the kind of direct force that refuses to respect a carefully designed prison. The fight also demonstrates how much the crew has changed since entering the Grand Line. In the East Blue, Luffy often reached the central enemy while the others handled separate battles. On Little Garden, the entire confrontation depends on one crew member creating an opportunity for another. Usopp restores hope. The prisoners rejoin the fight. Luffy delivers the final answer. When Mr. 3 falls, Usopp receives recognition from the giants and the crew as the hero of Little Garden. He enjoys the title, of course, but it means more than another exaggerated name. This time, the story is true. He saw danger, felt afraid, and acted anyway. That is the beginning of the warrior he wants to become. Away from the main battle, Sanji has spent much of the crisis separated from the others. He moves through the jungle, prepares meat from a dinosaur, and eventually discovers Mr. 3's wax-covered base. Inside, a transponder snail begins ringing. Sanji answers and hears the voice of Mr. Zero, the hidden leader of Baroque Works. Until now, Mr. Zero has existed more as pressure than as a person. He sends orders through intermediaries, controls agents who do not know his identity, and targets an entire kingdom without stepping onto the battlefield himself. Sanji's accidental contact with him gives the crew its closest encounter, yet with the intelligence directing the organization. It also reveals something important about Baroque Works. Failure creates immediate consequences. Mr. Zero expects confirmation that Vivi and the Straw Hats have been eliminated. Before Sanji can fully exploit the moment, Baroque Works messengers Miss Friday and Mr. 13 arrive. He defeats them and leaves the wax house with more than another victory. The Straw Hats now understand that the enemy pursuing Vivi is connected to a network extending far beyond the agents on Little Garden. Dory and Brogy survive the conspiracy designed to corrupt their duel. Their century-long conflict continues, but Usopp no longer sees it as pointless violence. To the giants, honor is not about winning quickly. It is about remaining worthy of the promise that began the fight. Before the Going Merry departs, Usopp declares that he will one day travel to Elbaf. His dream of becoming a brave warrior has gained a destination. The crew leaves Little Garden and points the ship toward Alabasta. For Vivi, the route finally appears open. Whisky Peak is behind them. The Baroque Works assassination team has been defeated. Every day still matters, but for the first time since revealing her identity, she can imagine reaching home. Then Nami collapses. Her temperature rises rapidly, and even Sanji's care cannot stop the illness from worsening. The crew eventually learns that she was bitten by a Kestia insect while exploring Little Garden. The prehistoric disease is dangerous precisely because ordinary doctors may never have encountered it. The timing could not be worse. Nami is the only person aboard who can reliably navigate the Grand Line. Without her, the crew cannot simply continue toward Alabasta. More importantly, Luffy has no intention of treating her life as something that can be risked for the schedule. Vivi wants desperately to reach her kingdom, yet she is the person who insists that they find medical help. This is a defining decision for her. Every hour of delay could cost lives in Alabasta. Baroque Works is still manufacturing conflict, and the rebellion may already be preparing for war. But sacrificing Nami in the name of the kingdom would make Vivi no different from the leaders who treat individuals as acceptable losses. She chooses her friend. The log pose directs them toward Drum Island, a winter kingdom famous for its doctors. The change in climate is immediate and violent. Tropical heat gives way to freezing wind. Snow covers the deck. The sea turns dark beneath an iron sky, and towering mountains rise from the island like enormous drums. The crew has entered another world. They approach the shore asking for medical assistance, but the islanders meet them with weapons. Their suspicion is not unreasonable. Drum Kingdom has already been damaged by the actions of pirates and by the failure of its own ruler. Outsiders bring danger, and the Straw Hat flag gives the villagers no reason to believe that Luffy is different. Vivi tries to negotiate. Luffy, driven by panic over Nami's condition, nearly responds with force when the villagers refuse them entry. He sees a sick crewmate and an obstacle between her and a doctor. Vivi sees frightened citizens who will become enemies if their fear is answered with violence. She stops Luffy and bows. A princess lowers herself before armed strangers and asks them to help Nami. The moment teaches Luffy a form of leadership that punching cannot provide. A captain can be stronger than everyone around him and still make the situation worse. Vivi's humility succeeds where his anger would have failed. The villagers allow them ashore. They explain that most of the kingdom's doctors were once controlled by King Wapol. Wapol hoarded medical knowledge and made treatment another privilege dependent on obedience. When a dangerous pirate force approached the island, the king abandoned his people rather than defending them. Now the doctors who remain are difficult to reach. The most capable is Dr. Kureha, an elderly physician feared almost as much as she is respected. She lives inside the castle at the top of the highest drum-shaped mountain, accompanied by a creature the villagers describe as a monster. Waiting for conditions to improve is not an option. Luffy places Nami on his back and begins climbing. Sanji goes with him. The ascent becomes one of Luffy's most punishing physical trials. Snow erases the path. The cold drains strength from his rubber body. Wind cuts across exposed cliffs, and every slip threatens Nami as much as the person carrying her. Sanji is injured during the journey, but neither man turns back. This is the practical meaning of calling Nami their crewmate. The title is not a word used during celebrations. It is a commitment that becomes real when carrying her forward hurts. At the castle, Dr. Kureha discovers 3 patients rather than 1. Nami is burning with fever from the Kestia bite. Sanji has suffered serious injuries. Luffy is approaching hypothermia after exposing himself to the mountain's cold. Kureha begins treatment with the confidence of someone who has no patience for drama around medicine. Then movement appears outside the castle. A small figure watches from a distance. He has fur, antlers, a blue nose, and a large red hat. When frightened, he tries to hide behind objects while leaving most of his body visible. He speaks like a human. He understands medicine, and when danger forces him to change, he can transform into something much larger. This is Tony Chopper, the creature Drum Island calls a monster. Before the Straw Hats can ask what he is, they will have to understand who taught him to become a doctor, why he believes there is no place in the world where he belongs, and how the death of one impossible dream gave him a reason to cure every disease he can. Tony Chopper has spent his entire life caught between categories. He was born a reindeer, but the blue color of his nose made him different from the rest of the herd. Even before gaining any unusual abilities, he learned what it meant to stand near a group without truly being accepted by it. Then he ate a devil fruit. The human fruit gave Chopper the power to speak, think, and transform between different physical forms. In his smallest form, he resembles a young reindeer with unusually human expressions. In his hybrid form, he walks upright and uses his medical knowledge with remarkable precision. In his heavy point form, he becomes enormous and muscular, powerful enough to be mistaken for a monster roaming the mountains. The fruit gave him intelligence. It did not give him belonging. The other reindeer feared what he had become. Humans saw a creature with antlers, fur, and a voice and responded with violence. Chopper gained the ability to communicate with both worlds, only to discover that neither wanted to hear him. By the time Dr. Hiriluk found him, Chopper had been shot and left injured in the snow. Hiriluk was not the kind of Dr. Drum Island respected. He was eccentric, impulsive, and operating outside the medical system controlled by King Wapol. During the Great Doctor Hunt, Wapol gathered the kingdom's doctors under his authority, making treatment dependent on the crown. Medical knowledge, which should have existed to preserve life, became another way for the king to preserve power. Hiriluk refused to participate. He hid, traveled where he was needed, and continued attempting cures that were often dismissed as impossible. When he found Chopper, he did not see an animal pretending to be human or a monster that needed to be destroyed. He saw a patient. More importantly, he saw someone who was alone. Hiriluk treated Chopper's wounds and slowly earned his trust. That process could not happen quickly because Chopper had no reason to believe kindness would last. Every group he approached had rejected him. Every attempt to become less lonely had ended with greater pain. Hiriluk remained. For roughly a year, Chopper lived with him, learned from him, and experienced something close to family for the first time. The doctor taught him that medicine was not only about treating the visible damage to a body. A country could become sick. A person could survive physically while losing the hope that made survival meaningful. Drum Island was suffering from that deeper illness. Wapol had taught the population that care belonged to whoever controlled the doctors. Fear had divided the kingdom. Hiriluk dreamed of creating a cure that would restore hope to people who had forgotten what hope felt like. His inspiration came from a sight he had once witnessed far from the endless winter: cherry blossoms spreading across the sky. Drum Island could not naturally grow that springtime landscape, but Hiriluk believed the image itself could heal something. If people living beneath snow and tyranny saw the sky transformed into impossible pink blossoms, perhaps they would remember that the world was larger than the conditions surrounding them. To most people, this would sound foolish. Chopper understood it as a dream. Hiriluk also changed the way Chopper thought about pirates. The pirate flag, he explained, did not have to represent cruelty. It could represent adventure, freedom, and a refusal to abandon an impossible goal. That lesson matters when Chopper later meets Luffy. Luffy's flag is not merely a warning placed above a ship. It announces that the people beneath it have chosen their own direction. Every straw hat carries a dream the world has called unrealistic. Sailing together does not make those dreams smaller. It gives each person others who will defend the dream when doubt becomes overwhelming. Chopper wants to believe that such a life could include him. He is terrified that it cannot. His time with Hiriluk ended when the doctor suddenly forced him away. Chopper interpreted the rejection through the history he already knew. He assumed Hiriluk had finally realized that keeping a strange reindeer boy nearby had been a mistake. The truth was more painful. Hiriluk was dying. He believed pushing Chopper away would spare him from watching the disease progress. But Chopper overheard a conversation with Dr. Kureha and learned that his only friend was gravely ill. For the first time, Chopper had a medical problem he desperately needed to solve. He traveled into the Valley of Death, searching for what he believed was a cure-all mushroom. The journey nearly killed him. He returned wounded but proud, convinced that he had found the medicine capable of saving Hiriluk. Chopper also revealed his new dream. He wanted to become a doctor who could cure any disease. Hiriluk accepted the mushroom because it represented the purest expression of everything he had taught. Chopper had risked himself for a patient, refused to surrender to an impossible diagnosis, and returned carrying hope. But hope without knowledge can still cause harm. The mushroom was poisonous. Chopper's attempt to save Hiriluk could not prevent his death. The tragedy created the fear that still shapes Chopper when the Straw Hats arrive. He possesses real medical skill, but he also remembers the moment when love, confidence, and insufficient knowledge combined into a fatal mistake. Dr. Kureha took him in after Hiriluk died. Where Hiriluk gave Chopper hope, Kureha gave him discipline. She refused to let grief become an excuse for carelessness. Medicine demanded study, judgment, and the humility to recognize what a doctor did not yet understand. Under her guidance, Chopper transformed his dream into expertise. That expertise is what saves Nami. Kureha and Chopper identify the Kestia infection, treat the fever, stabilize Sanji's broken ribs, and address Luffy's hypothermia. The strange creature hiding outside the castle is not merely an assistant. He is already the doctor the Going Merry desperately needs. Luffy sees that immediately. He also sees that Chopper's hesitation has little to do with whether he wants to sail. Chopper wants the ocean, adventure, and the shining world Hiriluk described. He wants to study diseases beyond Drum Island and become capable of curing illnesses no one else can. but he has spent so long being called a monster that he assumes every invitation contains a misunderstanding. Perhaps Luffy will accept the small, harmless-looking version of him and become afraid when he sees the larger form. Perhaps the crew will admire his medical knowledge but reject everything that makes him unusual. Luffy refuses to allow Chopper's fear to control the conversation. When Chopper reveals his transformations, expecting horror, Luffy reacts with excitement. The supposed monster does not disqualify him from joining the crew. It makes Luffy want him aboard even more. The response is almost comical in its simplicity. Chopper has built an entire prison from the belief that he must become normal before anyone can love him. Luffy does not ask him to become anything else. He invites Chopper to be a pirate. At first, Chopper refuses. He claims that he cannot leave Koreha or Drum Island. Like Sanji at Baratie, he turns gratitude into a reason to remain in one place. Korea understands that accepting Hiriluk's dream requires Chopper to go where that dream leads. Before he can make the choice, Wapol returns. The former king sailed away when his country faced danger, abandoning the citizens he expected to obey him. Now that the immediate threat has passed, he has come back to reclaim the throne as though leaving never ended his right to rule. Wapol possesses the power of the munch-munch fruit. He can consume almost anything and transform what he eats into weapons or altered forms. The ability reflects his entire approach to leadership. He sees people, resources, and even the kingdom itself as things that exist to satisfy his appetite. Nothing is shared. Everything is swallowed. Wapol's return forces Drum Island to confront the fear that remained after his departure. The villagers survived without him, but surviving and becoming free are not the same thing. As long as Wapol can return and reclaim the castle, the old system still defines the future. Dalton, once a member of Wapol's royal guard, finally stands openly against him. He understands the king's cruelty because he helped enforce the system that allowed it. Resistance is not only an attempt to protect the villagers, it is an act of responsibility for the years when loyalty kept him silent. Across the island, the Straw Hats are divided but not disconnected. Zoro and Usopp fight beside the people below, proving that the crew's concern now extends beyond anyone sailing beneath their own flag. Sanji joins Chopper against Wapol's forces near the castle. Vivi places herself inside another kingdom's struggle even while her own country moves closer to civil war. And Luffy looks at Wapol's flag. The symbol flying above Drum Castle does not represent freedom, loyalty, or a shared dream. It represents ownership. Wapol believes planting it above the kingdom makes every person beneath it part of his property. Luffy knows a pirate flag should mean the opposite. A real Jolly Roger is a promise that the dream beneath it will not be surrendered. For Chopper, this is the moment Hiriluk's lessons return. He can continue hiding inside the castle, believing that the world will always reject him, or he can defend the idea that first gave his life direction. He chooses to fight. The lonely reindeer who once had no herd now stands beside Sanji, Vivi, Dalton, and Luffy. The people supporting him are human, pirate, royal, former soldier, and future crewmate. None of the old categories matter. Wapol has come to consume the kingdom and everything it represents. To defeat him, Chopper will have to stop treating the part of himself called monstrous as something that must remain hidden. Wapol's greatest mistake is believing that Chopper's unusual body makes him weak. The former king sees the reindeer doctor as another creature to consume, command, or destroy. He cannot understand why anyone would protect someone who looks different because Wapol has never understood relationships that are not based on usefulness. Chopper has spent years fearing the same judgment. Now he stops running from it. He shifts into his larger fighting form and enters the battle beside the Straw Hats. The transformation once caused humans to call him a monster, but here it becomes the strength he uses to protect them. Nothing about Chopper has changed except the meaning he gives himself. He is not powerful despite being different. His difference is part of his power. Across the castle grounds, Wapol's forces collide with the people he abandoned. Dalton, Kureha, Vivi, and the villagers join the Straw Hats rather than waiting for another ruler to decide their future. The battle is deliberately shared because Drum Island's liberation cannot belong to one hero. Dalton fights to correct his years of service under Wapol. Kureha fights to protect the medical freedom Hiriluk believed in. Vivi fights for people who are not her subjects, proving that her sense of responsibility extends beyond royal borders. The Straw Hats fight because someone they care about has been threatened. Chopper fights because Drum Island gave him pain, family, knowledge, and a dream. Leaving the island does not require him to stop loving it. Wapol escalates by consuming his own guards and incorporating their bodies and weapons into himself. The king who treated everyone around him as property finally turns his loyal followers into literal components of his power. It is the complete corruption of leadership. Luffy's crew becomes stronger by allowing each member to remain distinct. Wapol becomes stronger by erasing the people who serve him. That difference decides the battle. Sanji creates the opening Luffy needs, helping launch his captain into the final attack. Luffy drives Wapol through the castle window and sends him away from the kingdom he abandoned and attempted to reclaim. When Wapol's control ends, the guards he consumed return to their human forms. The kingdom has survived its former king. Now it must decide what will replace him. Dalton is the natural figure to guide that future, not because he demands authority, but because he understands how easily authority can be abused. His regret has taught him something Wapol never learned. Protecting a country means serving its people, not owning them. For Chopper, victory creates a different problem. Luffy repeats his invitation. Chopper still struggles to accept it. He lists the reasons he cannot belong with them, describing himself as strange, frightening, and unlike anyone else. These are not objective facts. They are the language of every rejection he has internalized. Luffy barely lets him finish. He does not need Chopper to justify his appearance, prove his worth, or explain why a talking reindeer deserves a place on the Going Merry. Chopper is a doctor with a dream, a loyal heart, and nowhere he feels fully accepted. That makes him exactly the kind of person who belongs among the Straw Hats. Chopper finally says yes. His choice expands the meaning of the crew. Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji were all outsiders in human society, but Chopper has spent his life questioning whether he is even allowed to call himself a person. The Straw Hats answer that question without hesitation. Family is not something their bodies, origins, or histories can disqualify them from. Kureha responds to Chopper's departure in her usual way. She appears angry, chases him from the castle, and hides affection beneath aggression. Like Zeff pushing Sanji away from Baratie, she knows that love can become selfish when it demands that someone remain close instead of allowing them to grow. Chopper runs toward the Going Merry. Then Kureha completes Hiriluk's final dream. Using the medicine and research he left behind, she creates an explosion across the winter sky. Pink clouds spread above the island and descend like cherry blossoms, transforming the snow-covered kingdom into the impossible spring Hiriluk once imagined. Chopper stops and looks upward. The sight does not undo Hiriluk's death. It cannot return the year they spent together or remove the guilt Chopper carried after bringing him the poisonous mushroom. Instead, it proves that Hiriluk's dream survived him. The doctor believed a miraculous sight could heal a country by reminding its people that impossible change was still possible. The blossoms arrive only after Wapol's defeat, when Drum Island finally has the freedom to become something new. They are both a farewell and a beginning. Chopper cries as the Going Merry sails away, carrying Hiriluk's flag, Kureha's training, and his own promise to become a doctor capable of curing any disease. The Straw Hats entered Drum Island with 5 permanent members and a princess who expected to leave them once they reached Alabasta. They depart with a doctor and a cause. Vivi has gradually stopped seeing the crew as transportation. At Laboon, they were unpredictable pirates who happened to be traveling in the right direction. At Whisky Peak, they became temporary protectors. On Little Garden, they risked themselves against Baroque Works. On Drum Island, they delayed their voyage for Nami, defended strangers, and welcomed Chopper without asking what his presence could cost them. Vivi finally understands why people follow Luffy. He does not build loyalty through speeches, plans, or promises of reward. He places himself beside someone at the moment that person believes they must stand alone. The Straw Hats tell Vivi they will not simply deliver her to Alabasta and sail away. They will help save her kingdom. That promise transforms the series' current direction. Finding the One Piece remains their ultimate goal, but the voyage is no longer a straight line toward treasure. Friendship has created obligations they willingly accept. Luffy wants to become the freest person on the sea. His version of freedom does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means choosing who and what he will fight for. The final revelations of the season show how dangerous that choice has become. Vivi has learned the identity of Baroque Works' hidden leader. Mr. Zero is Sir Crocodile, another of the 7 warlords of the sea. The title connects him directly to Mihawk, but the two men represent very different threats. Mihawk operates openly, guided by personal standards and almost unmatched ability. Crocodile works through secrecy, misinformation, and an organization whose members rarely understand the purpose of their own missions. He has positioned himself as a powerful pirate, protected by an arrangement with the world government while secretly destabilizing Alabasta. The kingdom's rebellion is not a natural political disagreement. Someone is cultivating it. Crocodile and his second-in-command call their plan Operation Utopia, but the name reveals almost nothing about what they intend to create from the coming civil war. Vivi knows only that her father is a good king, her people are turning against him, and Baroque Works has invested enormous effort in making reconciliation impossible. Crocodile's second-in-command also receives a true identity. Miss All Sunday is Nico Robin, a woman whose wanted poster shows that the world government placed a bounty on her when she was still a child. She serves Crocodile and moves his plans forward, yet the series makes it clear that her personal motives remain hidden. The photograph of a wanted 8-year-old raises a disturbing question. What could a child have done to make the world government fear her? Elsewhere, Smoker and Tashigi recover part of the recorded conversation between Sanji and Mr. Zero. They hear enough to connect the Straw Hats, Vivi, and Crocodile, but not enough to understand the relationship. Their existing beliefs fill in the missing information. Because they already see Luffy as a dangerous pirate, they assume the Straw Hats may be working with Baroque Works and holding Vivi against her will. The misunderstanding gives the Marines a sincere reason to pursue people who are actually trying to prevent a national disaster. Once again, the series shows that justice can fail without becoming openly corrupt. Smoker wants the truth. His certainty about pirates prevents him from recognizing it. Drum Island leaves behind one final mystery. Kureha refers to the former pirate king by his complete name, Gol D. Roger. Luffy is Monkey D. Luffy. The repeated initial links them in a way that may extend beyond ambition or coincidence. Roger smiled at death in Logtown. Luffy did the same. Both inspire others to move toward dreams that seem impossible. Both carry the letter D. Kureha calls attention to something known as the Will of D, but the series does not yet explain what that means. It does not need to. The mystery changes the scale of Luffy's journey. He may believe he is simply a young pirate fulfilling a promise to Shanks, but forces across the world are beginning to see patterns around him. Dragon intervened in Logtown. Garp chose not to stop him. Mihawk recognized the potential in his crew. Crocodile's conspiracy now stands directly in his path. Luffy understands almost none of it. He only knows that Vivi needs to reach Alabasta, Chopper is now their doctor, and another adventure waits beyond the horizon. The Going Merry sails onward with 6 Straw Hats aboard. Ahead is a desert kingdom moving towards civil war, an unseen operation controlled by a warlord, and a conflict far greater than anything the crew faced in the East Blue. They entered the Grand Line searching for treasure. By the end of Season 2, they have found something more dangerous. A reason to change the world around them. The live-action One Piece succeeds because it never treats sincerity as something that needs to be apologized for. A less confident adaptation might have tried to protect itself from the source material's strangeness. It could have mocked the costumes, reduced every emotional moment to a joke, or presented Luffy's optimism as childishness waiting to be corrected. Instead, the series allows its characters to believe completely in impossible things. Zoro believes a promise made to a childhood friend can shape his entire life. Nami believes the world can be captured on a map, even after her talent is turned into a weapon. Usopp believes the frightened person he is today can become the brave warrior described in his stories. Sanji believes in an ocean many experienced sailors dismiss as fantasy. Chopper believes medicine can advance far enough to cure any disease. Luffy's greatest ability is not his rubber body. It is his refusal to laugh at those dreams. That quality explains why the crew follows him despite his lack of planning. Luffy often has no idea how to reach the next island, defeat the next enemy, or survive the consequences of announcing his ambitions. But when another person reveals what they truly want, he treats that desire with complete seriousness. He never tells Zoro to choose a safer opponent. He never tells Nami that mapping the entire world is unrealistic. He never asks Sanji for proof that the All Blue exists. He never tells Chopper that some diseases must remain incurable. Luffy creates loyalty by giving people permission to become the version of themselves they were afraid to pursue alone. The first 2 seasons also build their villains around corrupted versions of that same freedom. Buggy wants the freedom to make everyone else part of his performance. Kuro wants wealth without loyalty or consequence. Arlong turns historical suffering into a justification for tyranny. Wapol believes ruling a kingdom means consuming whatever he desires. Crocodile's emerging plan appears to use an entire nation as a piece on a larger board. Each villain wants freedom only for himself. Luffy's freedom expands when it is shared. That is why the Going Merry matters so much. It is not merely transportation carrying the plot from one island to another. It is the first place every Straw Hat chooses to call home. The ship was given by Kaya because Usopp protected her. Its kitchen gives Sanji a place to pursue the All Blue. Its navigation room allows Nami to chart a path no one else can see. Its deck gives Zoro somewhere to train, and its flag gives Luffy's dream a visible shape. When Chopper boards, the Merry becomes something even larger. It is a home where a person who was rejected by humans and reindeer does not have to choose which category he belongs to. He is simply one of the crew. The adaptation reinforces that family through repeated visual promises. Luffy places Shanks' hat on Nami when she finally asks for help. Zoro raises a sword after losing to Mihawk and promises his captain that the defeat will not define him. Sanji bows to Zeff before leaving Barati. Chopper sails beneath Hiriluk's cherry blossoms. None of these moments work because the series is trying to recreate a famous image mechanically. They work because the live-action story earns the emotion surrounding that image. That was the challenge from the beginning. Eiichiro Oda's original manga has been running since 1997, creating a world whose scale, tone, and mythology cannot be compressed into a conventional television adventure without difficult choices. The live-action production therefore rearranges events, combines certain functions, and gives characters such as Garp, Kobe, and the Marines more continuous roles. Those changes allow the world beyond the Going Merry to keep moving. While Luffy gathers his crew, Kobe develops from a frightened captive into a Marine willing to question authority. Garp struggles between his duty and his desire to protect his grandson. Smoker interprets Luffy through the threat once represented by Roger. Baroque Works advances a conspiracy long before the Straw Hats understand its scale. The result is a story where the crew's adventure feels connected to an expanding world rather than isolated episodes. That expansion can already be seen in the difference between the two released seasons. Season 1 is about assembling the family. Season 2 is about discovering what that family will do when the world becomes larger than them. The East Blue gives each original Straw Hat a personal enemy or wound to overcome. The Grand Line introduces political conspiracies, unfamiliar ecosystems, secret organizations, ancient mysteries, and powers the crew cannot yet understand. Even the meaning of the letter D suggests that Luffy's journey is connected to a history older than his promise to Shanks. He is no longer simply approaching danger. Dangerous institutions are beginning to notice him. The current ending leaves the Straw Hats sailing toward Alabasta with 6 permanent members, Princess Vivi under their protection, and Sir Crocodile positioned between them and their destination. Their next conflict will not be limited to rescuing one village or defeating one pirate captain. They are approaching a civil war created through manipulation, distrust, and the hidden ambitions of a warlord. Netflix has confirmed that the next chapter is titled One Piece, The Battle of Alabasta, and is planned to arrive in 2027. The announced story follows Luffy and the crew as they attempt to save Vivi's desert kingdom from Crocodile and Baroque Works. But the most important preparation has already happened. Vivi has learned that asking for help is not a failure of leadership. Chopper has learned that belonging does not require becoming normal. Usopp has discovered that courage can exist at the same time as fear. Nami has accepted a crew she once planned to betray. Sanji has left the place where he was safe. Zoro has survived the defeat that showed him how far he still has to climb. And Luffy has begun proving that becoming king of the pirates is not about ruling the sea. It is about becoming so free that fear, cruelty, and the expectations of the world can no longer decide who he is. The One Piece remains somewhere beyond the horizon. Its nature is still unknown, and the route toward it has barely begun. Yet the treasure is already influencing every decision in the story because it represents a world in which the impossible might be real. That belief connects Roger's final smile, Shanks' sacrifice, Hiriluk's cherry blossoms, Laboon's promise, and every dream declared above the barrel on the Going Merry. The series begins with one boy insisting that he will become king of the pirates. By the end of its second season, the important question is no longer whether anyone believes him. It is how many people will recover their own dreams because he does. If you want more complete series journeys in this style, stay with SeriesSpan Cinema and tell me which Straw Hat dream you most want to see fulfilled, because the crew has finally entered the Grand Line. Their real adventure is only beginning.